Hello again. Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted for a second time this evening on, again, same date. It's still the 4th of August. It's now 11:17. I'm a couple minutes later than I had scheduled it. I'd scheduled this to start at 11:15, but stuff always happens. And in my last video, I did not give Candy her TREAT, her treat. She gets one at the start of every video. If you're new, regular watchers know the drill. I always start off with giving my dog a treat because part of it is engagement. Part of it is that, try and give people what they want, and people like dogs. So, this guy's got a cute, look at her. Cute looking dog, border collie, smart as a whip. Not exact, doesn't mean she's the most obedient. Oh, okay. Shake paw. All right, lay down. Speak. Lay down. Speak. Okay, make you do it twice. There you go. Show your face. Show your pretty face. Should have called her Stripe. Would have been a better name. The stripe down her, the white stripe down the front of the face. We got her on March 18th of 2020. Should have also named her COVID or Corona. COVID would have been a good name. Hey, COVID. I'd love to see people's reaction if we had called her that, actually. Live chat is on. And I know I had a number of people watching my last one. Maybe they've had enough of me, and that would be fair enough, and said, got two in a night. But I wanted to talk about something. What I want to talk about now is what I had planned to talk about. I'd set this one up earlier in the day. And the one I just did was based on this Swire syndrome that I only just learned about, and I decided to throw it out there. But this is something I've been planning to talk about before, and that's World War III is brewing. And it amazes me the degree to which people have, I don't like to say heads in the sand, but that's a pretty accurate description. A lot of people, when it comes to world events, significant world events, tend to bury their heads in the sand. And there's this attitude of, well, how does it affect me? And it doesn't affect me that much, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. There's a famous poem that came out after World War II, after the atrocities of the Nazi era were fully known to the world. And it goes something like this. I'm not sure of the words exactly, but it was written by a German pastor, a German cleric, member of the clergy, religious leader. And it goes, first they came after the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't speak out. Then they went after the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't speak out. Then they went after the trade unionists, but I didn't belong to a trade union, so I didn't speak out. Then they went after the Jews, but I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't speak out. Then they came after me, and there was no one left to speak out. And that's what I think continues to happen in today's world. It's, how does this directly impact me? I'm not paying attention to the situation in Israel and the Middle East in general, because how does it affect me? I've got too much going on in my own life, and I'm not going to worry about it. And I think a great exemplar of that in our own lives, recent history, is the whole COVID era. The COVID business started to be reported on back in November, December of 2019, certainly more in January, February, as things were heating up, and there were reports out of China and Italy and Iran of cases and stuff like that. But for the most part, everyone was just like, well, how does this affect me? And there was no one that I knew was experiencing widespread outbreaks in anyone's personal spheres, personal circles. Everything was normal. Good evening again to Daniel. Daniel has shown up on the live, and I see I have a number of people watching. The live chat is on. Fill it up. And of course, as always, if you're new and you want to smash that, what do they say? Smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, all that stuff. I'll say it again at the end. Anna Monarchy is here with hello, Gordon and fellow friends. And Anna Monarchy and I kind of disagreed in the last video, and that's okay. I hate this. One aspect of this world that I hate is that people have forgotten. And for the most part, I think we're good on this channel. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can maintain our humanity and realize that not everyone has to agree with me, and not everyone will. Man Monarchy puts it perfectly: agree to disagree. And Daniel Copeman gives it an amen. So be it. Yes. Anyway, when COVID broke out, on the Thursday prior to Sunday worship being shut down, the Thursday prior, the church I attend was having a youth group soup tasting event. And my wife, my youngest, the three of us, we went. We all tasted soups. It had to be around 100 people in the fellowship room, all tasting the soup, socializing. Life is normal. And then just a day or two later, the government came down and started shutting everything down. That very first Sunday was when we first started to hear about 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and that we're asking everyone to shut things down for a 2-week period to save our hospitals from being overwhelmed and inundating the healthcare sector. And that first Sunday was a voluntary shutdown, and the church I attend complied. They say, okay, you want us to shut down for a week or two? No problem. And we all know what happened. A week or two became months and then years. And then people started to pay attention to COVID. I had been paying attention to it and doing what I'll call back of the napkin calculations on the cases coming out of China, going back to January and February. And I wasn't worried about it based on the facts. I was reading articles, one that came out very early in March that was put out by, trying to remember the publication, I think it was Bloomberg Business News. And they were reporting on Italy. And in Italy, that how 99% of the individuals going into hospital with COVID and having serious or fatal COVID, then over 99% were already over 80 years of age, so at the end of natural life expectancy, and over 99% had 2 or more underlying health conditions. And so I wasn't worried. I said, okay, it's for 99% of the population, this isn't an issue. But then the world shut down, then everyone started to care. And the same thing, I think, is unfolding right now with the situation in the Middle East. And I'm amazed by the fact that how people are still not paying attention to what's going on. When I go to church, fellow church members, the ones with whom I interact, but this will not be surprising, we know what's going on. It's talked about from the pulpit. We know what's happening in the world. But when I go to work, when I talk with my neighbors and such, head in the sand. Don't know, doesn't affect me. COVID, I'm not worried about COVID. It's not affecting me, but then it does. And when the world shut down and they locked everything down, now it's affecting you. And most people weren't prepared for COVID. They weren't prepared. And so the immediate response was to fall into an emotional state, which makes you very easy to manipulate. If the powers that be can drive you into an emotional state of fear, then you are easy to control. And what could happen what is happening right now in the situation in Israel is that Israel embarrassed Iran. This guy, Hania, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, the political head of Hamas, which is the group out of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, in a building in Iran, that he was taken out inside Iran. It was embarrassing. There are reports saying that Mossad and Israeli intelligence services basically were able to use Iran's own security apparatus, compromised individuals, and that they perhaps carried out the killing of this individual. And I mean, Iran has been made to look incredibly weak, and they are threatening to respond in force through either directly themselves or through their proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. And there are other groups in Iraq and Syria as well. Israel is pretty much surrounded. And there's talk that Israel, likewise, knowing that it is coming, they know that an attack is coming. It's similar to like what happened back around April 13th. It was around that date, April of this year, when Iran, for the first time in history, launched something like 200 to 300 rockets, drones, and missiles toward Israel. And then apparently, reportedly, 99.9 or 99% of them were all shot down. And apparently, the reporting is that Israel wanted to take the offensive, but that the United States, the Biden administration, reined them in and had them operate strictly in a defensive fashion. And there are some who suggest that within the dynamics of the Middle East, where showing strength is important, that it made Israel look weak. Well, look, we just fired 300-ish drones, rockets, missiles at them, and they didn't do anything. We can do it again. And we can do more next time. And so there's talk that this time that Israel might react preemptively. And in militaristic terms, taking the initiative. History favors the bold. And sitting back and waiting typically is not the best response militaristically. You want to take the initiative. You want to be bold. And so there is talk that Israel could do something preemptively. They are already doing some things. There are reports that they're bombing warehouse facilities where drones are believed to be held, drones, missiles, rockets, that they're hitting Iranian, or not Iranian, but Iraqi, Syrian, and Lebanese airfields and such to diminish the capacity of these groups like Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and others. I'm going to catch up. I got a few things being written now. Sheriff is writing, Sheriff of YouTube, they know they will be attacked because they orchestrate the attacks. There is this tendency, it's a commonly held belief, that all the world is but a stage, and that all this is merely theater, and that it strikes me that that's what Sheriff of YouTube is saying, and he's also saying that he identifies as a Mesopotamian. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the Tigris and Euphrates, that's where Iraq is. Iraq is modern day Mesopotamia. Brett Skinner is here asking if I'm a vet. Oh, am I a veteran? Yes. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces until June of 2021. Got my, certificate de service. Of course, it has to be bilingual. Certificate of service hanging up in my little cabinet there. Maybe I'll show it to you one time. But but I was in the communications branch. My title specifically used to be called SIGOP, Signals Operator, or RADOP, Radio Operator. But then everyone's got to be given a fancy title, and that's even in the military. And our title was changed to ACIS, which is Army Communication Information System Specialist. So RADOP, I was a radio operator. My last 6 years I spent at a radar station communication center here locally in Trenton, CFB Trenton. And it was talking on the radio and a lot of paper pushing, updating flight itineraries and things like that. Not exciting. I go onto the rifle range once a year. Horrible shot. I've said it many times before. Combat arms, no. I'm not infantry, not armored, which is tanks, not artillery, not combat engineer or anything like that. Anna Monarchy says, quite the mouthful, the acronym, ACIS, Army Communication Information System Specialist. And whenever I say as a rat op, that was the acronym for the term, the job description from years ago, and then Royal Canadian Corps of Signals. Anyway, I'm digressing from the main topic of this, is the fact that World War III shaping up. If this war blows up, as many think it will, I'm not, mine isn't a lone voice in the wilderness in this case. There are legions of people out there right now suggesting that this war is going, well, that it's inevitable, that there's going to be a response. It's simply a question of, will Israel act preemptively, or will they wait for Iran to strike, whether directly themselves or through one of their proxy groups? And Brett Skinner puts a question here that I think is significant. He's writing, will that war stay in the Middle East or reach Europe or even us, in your opinion? I think it will reach globally, and I will tell you why. Groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Palestinians have done a very good job in terms of marketing, which is just a fancy way of saying propaganda, of propagandizing the West. And there is a lot of sympathy for the Palestinian cause, and there's a lot of anti-Israeli sentiment, and sometimes it's rank anti-Semitism, but it's out there. And leveraging off that, I think we could see a terrorist-style attacks in large urban centers, both in Canada and the US and in Europe. I'm Canadian, by the way, obviously Canadian Armed Forces. So I don't know where everyone else is from. Brett, I don't know where you are from. If you're an American, Canadian, European, or what, if you want to tell me, that would be great. Say as much or as little as you want to on my channel. The live chat is on replay, meaning a day or two after this video, it's live now, but if you replay it a few hours or a day later, the live chat doesn't show up. But 2 days, 3 days later, the live chat is there, so anyone chancing on can see what you wrote. I should mention that. Sheriff writes, it will fix the population problem for the king. I don't know if he's referring to King Charles, who is one of these, his dad, Prince Philip, royal consort to Queen Elizabeth. He famously said that when he died, he wanted to reincarnate as a virus that would cure the overpopulation problem. And if that was the view of Prince Philip, I assume King Charles, his son, holds the same view. And the three biggest drivers of population reduction historically are war, disease, and famine. And quite often each goes hand in hand with the other. You get war often leads to disease because infrastructure gets hit, water plants are hit. You can get diseases like cholera, like Spanish flu after the First World War. War is not sanitary, and so disease can result. And then famine. War can impact food production. It can affect the supply chain, and it can affect food production. So, and this is where I think, people are saying, well, how does it impact me? Well, it will. If all the voices out there, and I'm one of them now, I'm joining in with these voices that are saying that, yeah, this is coming. There is going to be a war. And one of the first areas, we're talking about the Middle East, which is where most of the world's oil, or a large percentage of the world's oil, comes from, a significant portion of the world's oil. And if this spills over into Saudi Arabia, into Iran, into Iraq, these are major oil producing regions. And then what happens to the world price of oil as supply goes down? Sends the price of oil spiking. And then the cost of transporting goods like food goes up. Then we have inflationary pressure. And then we have the potential for, as Brett Skinner was writing when he was asking me about how this could spill over to other, outside of the Middle East, to Europe and North America. We could see acts of domestic terrorism happening in cities like London, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, who knows? Chicago, Stockholm, Sweden, who knows? We could see acts of terrorism happening by those aligned, because you have to understand that within the rhetoric of Iran, because basically, broadly speaking, this is Iran and Iran's allies against Israel and her allies. And from the Iranian side, Iran has never recognized, well, the Islamic um, leadership, the Islamic Republic of Iran has never recognized Israel's right to exist. And Israel is referred to as the little Satan. The little Satan. You have to know some of the history here. Before, it was 1979 when the Islamic Revolution took place. The nation of Iran had been led for 30 odd years by the Shah of Iran. He was a king, the Shah of Iran. And he was the ruler, brutal, backed by the US. And his family had been installed as leaders in Iran after I think it was in the 1950s, when the Iranians in a democratic election, they chose a gentleman by the name of Mosaddegh. And one of the first acts that Mosaddegh did, one of the first things he did, was to nationalize all of Iran's oil production, the oil wells. He said, these are now national assets. They do not belong to foreign national corporations like British Petroleum. They belong to Iran. Now, obviously, the Western world did not like that. The British Petroleums of the world did not like that. They were, similar in a fashion. It's similar to what Cuba did under Castro. And so the U.S. orchestrated a coup d'etat. They overthrew the Mossadegh regime. The reports are that they started blowing up mosques and would drop leaflets blaming Mossadegh. Mossadegh blew up this mosque, and the people revolted, and he was forced into exile. And then the U.S. installed the Shah of Iran, and the Shah of Iran, I'm not sure if it was the same guy or a father. I think it was a father and son. They ruled until 1978, 1979. And then there was an Islamic revolution led by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and they overthrew the Shah. He was forced into exile, and it's been an Islamic republic ever since. And they've never recognized Israel's right to exist. And again, they see Israel as the little Satan and the United States as the big Satan. So Americans may think, and Western-minded people may think, well, let Israel fight its battle, and if they get destroyed by Iran, fine. Let the Arab world take over Israel. This line that they stole it somehow, which makes no sense to me, doesn't make any sense historically. There was never a state called Palestine. There was a Turkish province. The old Ottoman Empire had a province. It was what we call Israel today, and parts of Jordan were part of the Syrian province of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans controlled it. Then, after the end of World War I, the British took control of it, and then Britain tapped out. They announced to the world. They said on May 15th, 1948. We're done. We're out of here. And you guys can sort it out yourself. And a war ensued, a war that lasted nearly a year, or just over a year, about a year. They had a war, and the war involved 5 Arab states and the Arab population of what had been Palestine, Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. 5 against and they all went and attacked the Jewish Palestinian population. And at the end of that war, Israel became a nation state. Finally, they were recognized by the UN after that war ended. Let me catch up on what's being written. I've got to scroll back up, though. I'm assuming, okay, Brett is telling me that he's an American from the USA. For what it's worth, if you're new to my channel, I spent 10 years growing up in your country. I grew up in New York, New Jersey, and Oregon. Up until the age of 9, I was a talker. I grew up in Glen Rock, New Jersey for the most part, Bergen County across the river from New York. And I can do it. I can talk with my old New York accent, but I don't do it anymore. It's not natural. I can put it on, though. Anarchy writes, there are already fights in the streets of Toronto, and I guess probably elsewhere, when Israel and Palestine protesters clash. Absolutely. The Palestinian protesters at one point clashed with the LGBTQ pride celebration somewhere. And, I find that so ironic because there's a group called LGBTQ for a Free Palestine or something like that. And that's incredibly ironic because a homosexual discovered to be a homosexual in a place like Gaza would be thrown off a building. We're talking about, extremist Islam here. There's no turn the other cheek. And off a building you go if you're gay. So this idea of LGBTQ for a Free Palestine blows my mind. But Anna Markey writes, royalty is a lame, artificial, egotistical concept, so is elitism. I always used to ask when in my younger days, how did King Charles or Queen Elizabeth, for that matter, how did they get that job? What qualifications did they have? Were they facetiously asking these questions? I know they're born into it. Brent writes, hey, Biden wanted you to know he's going to fund the war. Oh, yeah. Well, the rhetoric gets so heightened especially over Israel. It's such a polarizing issue. Some people support Israel, some do not. But if you divorce yourself from the emotion and just look at the facts, the fact is, and you can check this out, I mean, the United States is the big Satan. There are a lot of Americans and Canadians who basically say, leave Israel be. Let them fight it out themselves. Let's not help them at all. That's over there. It's not our problem. Well, especially for Americans, once little Satan, what the Iranians consider little Satan, is taken care of, who do you think they're going for next? The bigger Satan. And there's long been a desire in the Islamic world, in the broader Arab world, although Iranians aren't really Arabs, they're Persians, as someone has noted in the comments. But they still get broadly, it's the Islamic world, and sometimes people use Islamic and Arab synonymously. But within the Middle East and the Islamic world, there is a desire among many different groups, kind of basically want to be the leaders of the Islamic world. Nasser in Egypt tried to become kind of the kingpin of the Arab world, and he failed. And the Saudis want to be the kingpins of the Arab world, and they fought a 10-year civil war with the Jordanian regime, not Jordan, with Yemen, with the Yemeni regime, and killed like 250,000 children under the age of 5. It's incredible what the death and call it 250,000 Yemeni children under the age of 5. A lot of them dying just because they can't get access to even the most basic health care, or they're starving to death. You talk about a genocide. But no one cares about it because it doesn't get reported on the nightly news, and it's Arab on Arab, so who cares? Let them kill each other. But if it happens in Gaza now, it's, oh my God, this is horrible, and people get all upset, and it's like, why do you ignore Yemen for so long? Well, those 250,000 kids under 5 who got killed in that civil war between Saudi and the Iranian-backed Houthis, you don't care about those kids? Well, no, there are no Jews involved. I only get emotional when Jews are involved. I mean, there is a lot of anti-Semitism in this world, unfortunately. going to catch up. Yeah, so Biden will fund the war. Ultimately, the United States, if they're smart, will recognize that Israeli security is American security. Sheriff of YouTube writes that he identifies as royalty, but on a budget. I think we can all do that. I'm a hill. I can identify as a hillbilly royal. And Brett Skinner laughs, and he likes Canadian whiskey, Canadian rye whiskey. There's a little fun factoid. If you go down to the U.S. and you ask for whiskey, you're probably going to get Jack Daniel's bourbon, that form of whiskey. If you come to Canada and you ask for a whiskey, you're probably going to get rye whiskey, Canadian Club or Crown Royal. And if you go to the British Isles or to India and other parts of the Commonwealth, a lot of times you ask for a whiskey, you're going to get Scotch whiskey, something like Teachers or Johnny Walker, that kind of stuff. Anyway, but Brett writes, but let's be real. Iran is I'll say it, not a prude, is a shit ton of talk with little to no action. April 13th, from Iran itself, they launched somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 rockets, drones, and missiles at Israel. And now there are reports that Russia has been sending planes with armaments into Iran, basically saying to NATO, well, if you're going to fund if you're going to support Ukraine, who we are at war with, well, then we're going to support and give funding and arms and training to your enemy. Tit for tat. And things can blow up so easy because we already have, I mentioned it before, Turkey's President Erdogan, Erdogan, however you pronounce his name, Erdogan. He is saber rattling and threatening to invade Israel. And then you have, of course, Iran and Russia are tight. They are diplomatically, militaristically, they are allied. The Russians and Chinese have signed what is called 2 or 3 years ago, a no limits partnership. Obviously, I don't think that is, in point of fact, no limits. There are always some limits. Would that agreement include military? We know that Kim Jong from North Korea, that he has visited Moscow, and Vladimir Putin has promised to reciprocate with a visit to North Korea. And the Iran frames it as the axis of resistance, and others talk about the ring of fire or the axis of evil. But things are lining up for a major escalation. And there is talk that it could be tomorrow. Tomorrow, either Israel could respond preemptively, like they did in the 1967 war, when they didn't wait. In the 1967 war, Israel was basically signaling to the world, we're not ready for a major war. We're in trouble. Our military isn't well enough funded or armed. We can't go to war now. That was their public messaging. So Egypt started to mobilize troops on the border, on the Sinai-Israel border. They started to mobilize troops, and Nasser threatened to blockade Israeli ships in the Suez Canal and basically cripple Israel's economy. And then Israel kind of puffed out their chest and said, if you blockade our shipping, that's a red line and a declaration of war, if you blockade our shipping. But given that Israel looked so weak to the Egyptians called their bluff, and they said, all right, and they blocked their shipping. And then Israel responded. I think it was on a Monday morning. While the Egyptian Air Force was drinking their coffee and tea, the Israeli Air Force hit and destroyed, absolutely wiped out the Egyptian Air Force, their planes and their infrastructure, their landing strips, and the war was basically over. They call it the 6-day war. But they defeated Egypt on the first day. And then Egypt's allies of Jordan and Syria joined in and they attacked. But Israel was able to capture the Golan Heights. They got the West Bank, East Jerusalem. They grabbed the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza. Everyone thought they were weak, but they weren't. And the question is, there's talk that they could respond again preemptively, because there's already been pretty much an open declaration of war. Iran is saying that it's going to attack. So why sit back and wait? And there is talk that the United States is urging Israel to be restrained and to just play defense and not to act preemptively. And the question then becomes, if that's the stance that Israel takes and just waits and will be defensive and not offensive, when would Iran attack? And some say it could be in a day or two. Others are suggesting a significant date historically. They're saying it could happen sometime around, I think it's the 13th of August, which lines up with the dates on the Jewish calendar. And I forget the months. There's the month of Nisan. That's usually March, April, May. They have a lunar calendar, but the 13th of August lines up with the date on the Jewish calendar when the Jewish temple was destroyed, both by the Babylonians and then by the Romans. The Jewish temple was destroyed twice. There was the first temple called Solomon's Temple, and that was destroyed by the Babylonians, and that happened sometime around August 13th, 500-600 BC, or 300 BC. I think I get my dates mixed up. Pardon me. But the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, Solomon's Temple. And then it was rebuilt and later refurbished and renovated by Herod. That was called Herod's Temple. And that was destroyed by the Romans about 70 AD. And both times it was in around August 13th in our modern calendar. So there's talk that Iran may wait until that date, because that's something they would likely be aware of. And those were the two biggest defeats that the ancient nation state of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, ever suffered. When they were sent into exile the first time to Babylon, and then the second exile when they were the Jewish diaspora, when they were sent to the four corners of the earth. And if you read the Bible and the prophets and Amos and Isaiah and Jeremiah about how God would gather back his people a second time. He gathered them back the first time they came back into the Holy Land after the Babylonian exile. After the Babylonians were defeated by the Medo-Persians and King Cyrus allowed the Jews to return. That was the first return, but the Bible prophesies that there would be a second return, and that God would gather back his, Israel from the four corners of the earth. And people will like to put check marks in biblical prophecy saying that happened. Jews started coming back from the four corners of the earth after the nation state of Israel was created in 1948, and even before that, as the political cause of Zionism gained prominence in the world. Let me catch up. And this sheriff wrote, if Iran was smart, they would change their name back to Persia for a better, fresher look. Yeah. And that's why I say that was what I was thinking of when I said they're not Arab. They are Persian. But anyway, Brett Skinner writes, know what's in Bahrain. Well, Bahrain, from what I know people who have emigrated to Canada from Bahrain, and Bahrain is primarily oil refinery. They're not they don't produce the oil. They don't extract the oil. That's refining the oil. And I think there's also, I know there are U.S. military facilities there. I believe a naval base. The U.S. has a huge military presence throughout the Emirate states and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and in all the Emirate states. The U.S. has huge assets, bases, Air Force, naval, you name it. Sheriff of YouTube getting on to how we have the Satan. Israel's a little Satan, US the big Satan. Sheriff is writing, so Canada would be woke Satan. Satan is woke. Satan wants the world to disregard objective reality and just do what's right in your own eyes. Just do whatever is right in your own eyes and don't worry about objective reality, about how God's creation was created. You're better than God. God limits you. God puts constraints on you. He puts he binds you up in the reality of his creation. But Satan will come along and he will free you. And you know, if you're a boy, you can now be a girl. You're not bound anymore by you know, the world is upside down. And that you know, that was my video of yesterday, is the fact that the single biggest issue facing the world today, in the temporal world, the biggest issue is this war that's coming, in my opinion. This war is coming and is going to be huge and it's going to be bad, but that's still not the biggest issue in the world today. The biggest issue in the world today is a lack of faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And I realize that's not a popular view in today's world. That opens people up to mock and ridicule. You're just one of those brainless, born-again, Bible-thumping Christians, and I want nothing to do with you. And that's where I thank God for, you know, I'm overstating things, but I'm very grateful to see a voice like Jordan Peterson's in the world, and basically rehabilitating biblical wisdom and biblical teaching, and saying, you know, don't take if you want to take a brain dead, simplistic look at things and go, oh, there was a snake in a garden, really, and Jonah was eaten up by a whale, you know, and survived the gastrointestinal workings of a large sea mammal, you know, come on. And it's like, oh, really? So that's the depth of your analysis, is it? That's as deep as you're going to go, is the gastrointestinal workings of a sea creature. That's you're going to look at it that superficially. Well, okay, fine. If you want to be superficial about the Bible, is the most incredible book, you know, collection of books. Everyone knows the Bible is not a book; it is 66 books, a collection. And it is the most profound, deep, interconnected piece of literature. It's the most significant corpus of books in world history. And it's all interrelated. You can't just read the New Testament. If you want to have good understanding, you need to know the Old Testament as well, but I'm digressing. Sheriff writes, or Sideshow Satan. So we're either woke Satan or sideshow Satan in Canada. Jason King writes, good evening, Gordon. Gonna sit, relax, and listen. I hope everyone here is enjoying their week, everyone's having a good weekend. Trudeau will run and hide when we get hit with a serious problem war. Oh, goodness. Help us with Justin Trudeau at the helm. You know, because all he'll be considered with it, all he'll be worried about, Justin Trudeau, is optics. How do things look? He doesn't care about the truth. All he cares about is looking good, you know, in the moment. You know, I'm going to go. He loves his photo ops. He loves going to a grave and rubbing his eyes so they can force a tear out so that he can look good. Oh, we have such a, you know, and I have absolutely zero use for Trudeau. I'm becoming less and less enamored with the political world with each passing day. Cloudy writes, okay, we're cooked. Suck it up and yap. Fair enough comment. But we're not cooked. We're not cooked. If you have faith in Christ, you're not cooked. You know, we're talking about life everlasting here. This life is not the end. Satan wants us to think it is. The enemy wants us to believe that this life is all that matters, but it's not. This life is not the end. On earth, I keep saying it, on earth as it is in heaven. In this temporal space, we want to make this temporal space as close as we can to our eternal home. And we'll never achieve perfection, but we are heading to perfection. We are heading to glory. And it's our choice whether or not we want to go. It's our choice whether or not we want. You can choose to accept physiological, genetic, biological reality and say, I'm a guy. And that's all there is. There's just men and women, and that's reality. It's biological reality. Or you can play make-believe and say that a guy, fully anatomically, biologically, genetically a guy, that, well, he wants to be a woman, so I'm going to call him she, her. And you can play those games. And you can play the game and you can pretend that God doesn't exist and that everything just sprang out of nothing, pixie dust. You know, faith, trust, and pixie dust. And that the world just came into being magically out of nothing. Out of everything we see in this world, this gorgeous creation, these incredibly complex creatures, like even something as simple as a mosquito or a flower or a hummingbird or a whale. All these things just are all just accidents, just billions upon billions of random mutations that resulted in the most complex order you ever. You can believe that if you like. It's a choice. God does not force us to believe. He could manifest himself and make it plainly obvious, but he doesn't do that because that would be too easy. And it would remove meaning from our lives. If the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. The mountain has to be jagged, but that's where we're going. We're climbing a mountain, and it's a tough climb. Anyway. And Anne Monarchy writes about what I was talking about too, about queers for Palestine getting thrown off of roofs. Yeah, that's what would happen. Defenestration, fenêtre, window. They get thrown out of a window. I'd never heard of the term defenestration though. And Anne Monarchy also writes I'll leave that. That's for Jason King. And having typo problems on her phone or on his phone. Why does the world forget how many weapon systems the average American owns? That's written by Brett Skinner. Why does the world forget how many weapon systems the average American owns? Your Second Amendment rights, which in my younger days, when I was far more liberal in my worldview, I wasn't a big fan of your Second Amendment. As I've gotten older and wiser and have learned more, I recognize the absolute genius of the American founding fathers of having as their Second Amendment the right to bear arms, because governments can turn tyrannical. And we've seen that. And there's a big fear that in the United States that they are coming at that Kamala Harris, if they can orchestrate a win for her, that she will be coming after your guns. And obviously the government has huge weapon systems. They got drones, they got everything. But Americans, there are 340 million people in America. And it's numbers that win at the end of the day. And those who like to refer to themselves as the elites are very small in number. And it's a massive horde on the other side. And so a massive horde and well-armed is, look what happened in the French Revolution to King Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette. They lost their heads. Reading on. And Monarchy is something about American Pabst Blue Ribbon. Drinking some now. One of the cheaper beers available. But you're Canadian. I guess you get that at the LCBO. Anarchy writes, saying that all the people and even farm animals are also targets, not even to deplete the good supply, just out of malevolence. Look at what's happening with bird flu. They're decimating mainly poultry stocks, and some cattle are being wiped out. And is this going to have an impact down the road? And I think it's entirely possible. Well, I think it's actually likely. And I think it's also by design. Someone had to bring it up. Stranger in a Strange Land is there, talking about the incident on the USS Liberty when there was an attack launched. It's widely believed that the attack was from Israel on a false flag attack on the USS Liberty, which was intended to be blamed on the Egyptians, so that that there would be an excuse for a war between Israel and the United States against Egypt. And I don't discount that possibility at all, because false flag operations have been standard military operating procedure going back to Roman times and probably sooner. Deception is the name of the game in war. World War II, when Germany invaded Poland, the pretext for the invasion was that Polish soldiers had attacked a radio station, a German radio station on the Polish-German border. It's only because the Nazis lost, we found out that attack, it did take place. It was Nazi soldiers wearing Polish uniforms who had attacked their own radio station. And that gave Nazi Germany the excuse to go on air and go on their radio stations and fill the propaganda. We were attacked by the Polish army. They attacked our radio station. And then Germans, are no better or worse than any other population. And they were being attacked. It was a false flag. False flags happen all the time militaristically. Hank Holliday is back, my friend from Texas. We've got a few Americans here now, which is great. I actually don't consider there to be a heck of a lot of difference between Americans and Canadians. Some, but not a lot. We're moving closer and closer together. And the first time, it was 1975 when we first moved back to Canada. Canadian born, 6 months old. We moved down to New York City, stayed there till I was 9, and then we came back when I was in grade 4. And I remember the difference. The difference between Canadians and Americans at that time was stark. There's clear differences, but the differences now, 50 or so years later, we're becoming more and more the same. And anyway, Anarchy writes, if I know what's going on with the red heifer nonsense, like you, I haven't heard anything. I'm going through the Bible again. I read it all the time, but I'm going to read it again not chronologically rather, but I'm going in order. I'm going, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. And I'm in Numbers, and it's in Numbers 19. I just read that the other day. And that's where you get the red heifer sacrifice. And it occurred to me as well, there hasn't been any news on it. It's kind of been forgotten. There was a lot of expectation around it during Passover. And it's faded into background noise. I was wondering myself, could something happen? Could all of a sudden there be this red heifer sacrifice on the Mount of Olives outside of the Temple Mount? And because when the October 7th attack took place, the Hamas, they branded it the Al-Aqsa flood, because that's the name of the mosque on the Temple Mount. It's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there's fear among the Islamic community that Israel might or could do something to desecrate the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They don't like Jews praying on the Temple Mount because they consider it desecration of a holy Islamic site, even though it's the most holy site in Judaism. Things are complicated. And I find a lot of people rather than trying to learn the history. I mean, there's just so much to learn that they just simply tap out and they just give me something simple. Make one guy the good guy, one guy the bad guy, and that'll be the end. At the end of the day, humanity, we all have the capacity for good or evil, and we demonstrate that all the time. Israel can be good, Israel can be bad. The Islamic world can be good, they can be bad. God is good all the time. Anarchy is talking about a food bank being inundated with immigrants. The economy is bad. Could be a lot better. And Monarchy writes nuance versus absolutes. That's what I'm talking about. Nuance takes effort, takes reading, takes thought. Absolutes are far easier. Black, white, good, bad, right, wrong. Quite often in this beastly world with fallen, broken human beings, striving to be good, hopefully, but we fail. Life is complicated. Anarchy writes, I got woken up sleeping outside a drop-in center today by a Christian. That was kind of annoying. Christians can be very annoying. Christians often are so hell-bent on bringing someone to the Lord that we forget that we need to see things from where we need to meet people where they are at. And, listen more than we talk, which is funny to say for me, where I'm just going off verbal diarrhea right now. So I'm going to finish. And you don't worry about fixing your typos. Trudeau fancies himself a boxer. I'd like to meet him in a dark alley, LOL. I think, on honest opinion, that fight that he had with Patrick Brazeau, I think it was staged. I think that was a show. I think that was theater designed to help Trudeau win the Liberal leadership, and it worked. But anyway, I'm going to end it there. World War III. Pay attention to the news. It's coming. I think, non-perishable items, it would be wise to stock up, load up on things like rice. We are. Other non-perishable items. Unfortunately, in Canada and the northern U.S., our growing season is very short in terms of a backyard garden and things like that. But it's happened before. If you think about the context of when World War II broke out, there was rationing, there were all kinds of things like that, but it was a different world back then. Back then, people knew how to fix things. People knew how to sew, make their own clothes, knit, and so many of the skills that our grandparents and great-grandparents had, we've lost. We're now so reliant on technology and machines and manufacturing, and we don't know how to do things for ourselves anymore. Things like metalsmithing and butchering and things like that. Everything's done now in factories. Our farming is all factory farms. And our food, we all get it from the grocery store. No one goes to a farmer's market anymore. Or if they do, that's not that, they still go to the grocery store for most of their stuff. And then the farmer's market once a week, once every couple of weeks. And a lot of respect for Mennonite Amish type individuals who will know how to survive. Imagine if the electric grid goes down. Imagine if the internet goes down. So much could happen. And there's a shift taking place. Just going to read up on what's being written. Sheriff says, I think Brazeau was on the powder. He was known for a habit. Sheriff is going to eat pigeons and squirrels. Rabbits, we got lots of them in this area. I think I mentioned one night, Candy, the Wonder Pup, she killed a rabbit. I don't think she tore it up or anything. I think she was just, tossing around like a stuffed toy. And I think the thing legitimately died of stress. And then Brett writes, really enjoyed this live stream. I say, don't stock up. It's time to go hunting, survival of the fittest, and be a lion, not a sheep. Amen. And Brett, and anyone, if you're, I didn't bring it out. That's one of my copies. Get into this book. I implore you. I can't force you. It's choice. You have a choice to get into a relationship with the maker of all things, and you don't have to climb the mountain, because Jesus came down from the mountain and is willing to meet you where you're at. And if you can find a good church, but you don't have to. Church isn't essential, but it sure does help if you can find a good church that will guide you and where you can be in community and where you can learn and realize that no church, no matter which one you find, no matter how good it is, it'll never be perfect. And maybe they need you. Maybe you could help them become more perfect. So, last things. Monarchy, Alex Jones, I know how to skin a buck and run a trap line. These are skills I don't have. Being a bad shot notwithstanding, I'm probably good enough that I could, hit a deer or a moose or a large animal. I might have trouble with a squirrel, though. They're pretty damn small and fast. And Monarchy, squirrels are delicious, like something chicken meat. Anyway, God bless everyone. Going to end this the way I like to end my videos. I didn't end the last one this way, but I figure one blessing a day is enough. So may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord grant you and me and this world peace. So until I see you again, probably do another one tomorrow or no more than a day or two. God bless. Thanks everyone for chiming in. Everyone, I'm not going to say all the names because I don't like leaving people out. So everyone who commented, thank you. Hit that like button. Thank you for the 12 that I have so far. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. And if you liked what I had to say in this video or any other video, if you see a video and you go, hey, this guy, I think people might like him, please share me out. I'm trying to inject my voice into the public discourse. I had a comment recently from someone who called my video, my channel, they said they called it a ministry. And I love that, because that's what we're called to do. We're called to minister. And we all have our differing ways of doing that. So if someone wants to call this a ministry, hallelujah. And ultimately, I don't want to preach to the choir. I want people who don't believe to come and know the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the name above every name. So God bless, and we'll talk to you all soon. Good night.